It's been a hard day and I've been working like a dog.
Are you ready to get down to business? Join seasoned entrepreneur, community leader, and Army veteran Scott Shalom Klein, who will take you behind the scenes with those who work in America's small business scene and speak with leaders making an impact, creating jobs, and telling their story in entrepreneurship. So let's get down to business. On AM 560, The Answer, here's your host, Shalom Klein.
And indeed, we're all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. In business, we talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. And remember, you can always download podcasts on my website at syklein.com. And while you are there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you'll not want to miss. So let's jump right in with the one, the only, the productivity speaker. That's Shawn Shewchuk. Very, very excited for this conversation. Shawn is a motivational speaker that not only looks at the big picture, but also the practical applications and the ability to understand risk and reward. He is among the most sought after speakers in North America and has been named one of the top 25 speakers, which is awesome. Shawn is also the best-selling author of 2 books, including Change Your Mind, Change Your Results. And super excited to have Shawn on the program. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I always love to get to know the person behind the microphone, Shawn. To any of our listeners that might Google you, and we'll send people, of course, to your website in just a couple of minutes, but they see who you are now. But I know that didn't come overnight. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you became so passionate about business, so passionate about sales, which is something we'll talk about, and have become the well-known author and speaker that you are today.
Well, thank you for the question. I don't know how much time we have, but that might be a loaded one. Listen, I grew up a farm kid. That's the reality. And I was about 13 years old, and this will date me, of course. The internet didn't exist, at least not how it does today. And I asked my parents to write a check. There was an ad in the back of a magazine to order some kind of a book, self-published book about helping businesses grow or succeed. And I think it was $12 or $13, and they granted my request and wrote me a check for that. And I remember reading this book, and self-published in today's world is pretty commonplace. If we go back to that point in time, there was no such thing as self-published. But this individual had taken it and literally sat down at the typewriter and put a book out. And I read this book cover to cover. I was about 13 years old, but I'm a kid. I'm in school. Who am I going to consult with? The cattle down the lane don't care, what I might or might not know. So that's kind of where it started. I finished school, moved from small town to big city, and went and got myself a job. Quickly realized how really unemployable I was, and so started working through applying some of those principles I learned from that book. I happen to still have the book. It's in my office. I use pictures of it when I do presentations. It's kind of where it all began, because I think for a lot of folks today that are probably listening to our conversation today, there are people that want to do something. They have a message, they have a story, they have some drive and ambition to make a shift and a change in their life. But change comes hard for people. And I've found that the only people that really embrace change are babies in wet diapers.
Ain't that interesting? Absolutely. And across your books and across the folks that you speak to, you are really changing the paradigm on so many levels. I alluded to this in our intro, but you talk about how sales is not a dirty word. Can you talk about where you came up with that aha moment, if you will?
Yeah, something. I grew up in a home that was very entrepreneurial. Not that we had lots of money, but certainly entrepreneurial. And I think most people today that have never been exposed to becoming involved in a business as an entrepreneur or in the sales realm, there is a very high level of fear. Why? And I think it goes back to, and I'm not old enough actually to actually remember when this show came up. Things like I've seen it in syndication, WKRP in Cincinnati. Where you got this polyester suit wearing sales guy that can sell anything to anyone and put it where the sun don't shine, and the used car salesman type persona. And that's not sales, to be very clear. Hollywood has done something to the sales realm that isn't real. Sales is, besides being the highest paid profession in the world, sales is something you do with somebody, not to them. And when we start to understand that it's about sitting on the same side as the table as that individual you're having a conversation with, and pulling back the curtain, allowing them to see something from a completely different perspective than they may have ever entertained prior to that conversation. That's what sales is really all about. And when we move down that well a little bit, we start to look and say, okay, listen, it's relatively easy for a number of people to sell something that's tangible. Your laptop, your phone, your car, etc. You can see, feel, and touch it.
Hmm.
But when we start to go into something where we're selling a service that isn't tangible, and one of the ones that comes up in questions more often than not is coaching. Because if you look at most coaches today, most coaches can't afford to pay attention, never mind their bills. And there's a reason for that. Now, those individuals, they're well meaning, they have great stories, they have a message that the world needs to hear. But the challenge is the sales. And so when we start to understand that we need to be able to become a little bit more creative, we need to be able to paint a picture for that individual or individuals, plural, that we're having conversations with around what it is that we do. If you're a coach, and I'll say this very openly and bluntly, and some people look at me sideways when I say this, if you're a coach and you're selling coaching, you're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm chatting with Shawn Shewchuk, who is quite literally the productivity speaker, and you can find everything on his website, which is changeyourresults.com. He's also author of the book Change Your Mind, Change Your Results. And what we are about to touch on, Shawn, is something that quite literally will change all of the entrepreneurs and business owners tuning in to Get Down to Business, change their lives on so many levels. You have talked frequently about the proven three-step model to massively boost productivity. Again, we only actually have a few minutes remaining in this segment, but my goal is whet people's appetite, give them something to read your book and so on. Again, three-step method that will boost productivity. That sounds too good to be true, Shawn.
Well, and it's not, because if you start to understand something that um, in North America today, the average person is productive only 4 to 24 hours. So increasing productivity is actually not that difficult. If we could just one more hour from every individual, and for those of you that may be listening and are business owners or your leaders or your managers or your C-suite, if you got one extra hour from every individual on your team, just think of what your bottom line would look like at the end of the fiscal year. Um, and I want to come back to your question for a second, because I think it's really important that we all understand what productivity is. It's become a buzzword. And if you ask the average person today, what does productivity mean? They're going to, well, more. And perhaps that's true, but productivity is defined as any action step or activity that moves you in the direction of your goal or objective. So, what are you doing today that is productive, and what are you doing today that is not? And if all of us were to do a little bit of internalization of that, if we were to do some introspection to say, what am I doing today that's actually moving the needle, and what am I doing that isn't? And those things that you're doing that is non productive, in other words, not moving the needle, not moving you forward, not carrying you in the direction of your goal objective, oh my goodness, stop doing them. For those of you that are entrepreneurs, you can't grow or expand a business until you know what you shouldn't be doing. That's where you start this whole productivity journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something as promised that can quite literally again change productivity, and you talk about it in your book quite a bit. Last thing that we have time for, Shawn, is talking about time management. Even in this conversation, we are talking obviously on the radio with limited time. I wish we could go on for hours and hours and talk about each of these topics at great length. But time management is a term that's thrown around quite a bit. But you believe it's baloney, is that right?
Listen, we've heard for generations now that we need to manage time better, and it is garbage. It's absolute garbage. You cannot stop the clock. We're talking about being on the radio, and obviously, for anyone who's ever done an interview, there's a clock running. It's always running. You cannot stop this. So you can't manage time. You get all there is, but you can manage what you do in the in that time that you've been gifted with. What are those high leverage activities? If you've got an hour, what are you doing? I tell people this: if you're in business and you want to improve, that means you want to grow, expand, or scale, you need to be doing something different, dramatically different. And people say, well, I don't have the time, but they're busy for the sake of being busy. Busy does not equal productive. And so once we start to understand there are things that you shouldn't be doing, and I'll share this very quickly. I started working with a company, this has got to be about 15 or 18 years ago. and they were doing well. Mom and pop started in the basement of their house, and they built it up to about $35 million a year. And they called me in to help them because they had plateaued there. And the first day she phoned me, the wife, she said, Shawn, we had an amazing day. I said, share with me. How was it? She goes, we did this, and she shared with me. And I said, well, it's 6:30 at night. What are you doing? She goes, oh, we're cleaning the bathrooms, emptying the waste paper baskets. Listen, that is a non-productive activity. Now, I know it needs to get done, and that's what she said to me. But somebody else can be doing
Yeah.
those types of jobs. You need to be doing something that moves the needle.
For sure. Shawn, I want to make sure people learn how they can move the needle forward. I know you talk all about it. Shawn, how can we get in touch with you and pick up a copy of your new book?
Changeyourresults.com. Go to the store, get a copy of the book. And then for those of you out there that want to become a coach, go to lionfactorcoaching.com. Brand new, helping coaches.
Fantastic. Shawn Shewchuk, thank you so much for sharing your passion and expertise with us. Can't wait to bring you on real soon onto the program. A quick break. A lot more coming up on Get Down to Business, the show all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship.